Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Fanfic Series 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto could use more than one chakra style and fall in love with Hanabi Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Luck was a very foreign concept to Naruto. It was just something that rarely happened to him. But when it did so happen to stumble onto the boy, it was not a very nice visitor. Naruto Uzumaki was not a very lucky person. Well, most people wouldn't call orphans lucky. But Naruto took his lack of luck to an extreme level. The day he was born, he was hated by society. The villagers of Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves, seemed to outright hate the boy. The insults, unfair treatment, lack of attention and the rare beatings were all thrown at Naruto. The village held nothing back from him. Today was just another chapter into Naruto's shitty and unlucky life. An hour ago he was locked in his room in the orphanage. He was listening to the sound of the rain hitting the roof. Suddenly two men and his caretaker walked into his room. Naruto immediately noticed that the two men were carrying weapons. The caretaker turned to the two men and smiled. She then walked out of the door, locking it in the process. "Oh, I am so going to enjoy this," one of the men said. Naruto started to slowly crawl back as the men started to walk towards him. Naruto's eyes widened as he felt his back impact against the wall. He looked up and saw the two men staring at him with a predatory look in their eyes. Tears started to pool into Naruto's as he tried to stop the unavoidable. Please don't hurt me," Naruto whimpered pathetically. One of the men sneered and came across Naruto's face with his club. Naruto slammed into the wall roughly and slid to the ground with a groan. Naruto could tell that the man had broken his jaw, gave him a black eye and he could feel the massive amount of blood pooling into his mouth. This did not worth Naruto as he felt the usual rush of chakra go to his cheek and immediately felt his wounds start to heal. Naruto looked up in fear as the two men descended on him. They proceeded to beat him violently. At one point the caretaker came to check on the two men. The other orphans quietly followed her, wondering why she was up so late at night. They watched in fascination as the adults continued to beat on Naruto. Naruto managed to lock eyes with each of the orphans. He began to plead and beg them for their help but none of them attempted to help him. After about a half of hour, the adults stopped beating on Naruto. They then roughly grabbed him and threw him into the streets. And even worse for Naruto, it was a stormy night. Naruto got up as the door slammed behind him loudly. He hissed in pain and started to limp off into the streets. The storm had managed to shut down all of Konoha. No shop or stand was open. Naruto was left deserted in the streets. After several minutes of painful walking, Naruto had managed to walk into the village's center. To his left stood the Hokage Tower. There worked the Hokage, the strongest ninja in the village, Hiruzen Sarutobi. The Hokage was probably the only one in the village that showed even an inkling of love towards Naruto. The Hokage tried his best to support Naruto while trying not to look biased towards him. Unfortunately, he was not able to do much. It only got Naruto a couple trips to the ramen stand. But that was not enough to compensate for the treatment of the villagers. All around him stood the shops and stands of the people who hated him. The ones that tortured and abused him. They all surrounded him. Naruto was not a very lucky person indeed. Now statistically the chances of ever getting struck by lightning in anybody's life is 1 in 5,000. The chance of getting struck by lightning in a year is 1 in 700,000. Now the chance of ever getting strike in any living moment is 1 in 8,987,657. Now it would take a very unlucky person to get struck by lightning ever. Fortunately for lightning and unfortunately for Naruto, he was a very unlucky person. Naruto felt the lightning before he heard the thunder. He felt the air around him electrify. When he looked up, he saw a white streak that was coming straight towards him. Before Naruto could even move, the lightning hit him, head first. Naruto felt a searing hot pain streaming through his body. His muscles screamed in pain as the high amount of electrical energy tore through them. He fell to the ground in a sizzling and spasming pile of flesh. Naruto lay unconscious in the middle of the village. The rain pounded against his body. The ground beneath him was burnt black. It was a bad day for Naruto indeed. Early next morning, Hiruzen Sarutobi led a very exciting life. He had met and personally befriended the first, second and fourth Hokages. He had fought through 3 great shinobi wars. He had become Hokage, retired and then became Hokage again. It was a very exciting and fulfilling life. But the one thing that always bothered him was a boy named Naruto Uzumaki. Now Hiruzen was there for Naruto's birth, and since that day he knew that he would be a special boy. But as of lately he has doubted his earlier judgment. Naruto's potential seemed to have been snuffed out by the villagers. Hiruzen walked out of the Hokage tower, stretching himself out. He had stayed overnight in an attempt to overcome his infinite amount of paperwork. Unfortunately he had lost the battle. Hiruzen began to walk towards the village square, as it was a stop during his usual early morning walk. There was a large crowd gathering in the center of the village. It was weird that this huge amount of people would be up in Konoha. Hiruzen made it to the crowd. He started to push his way through the crowd. When he got the center, he saw a horrific sight. Naruto lay in the village center. The earth under him was scorched black. He lay on his back. His body would spasm at random occurrence. His hair was standing up on its end. Move, Hiruzen said. The crowd looked back and saw that a furious Hokage was standing behind them. They quickly cleared a way for him. Hiruzen rushed to Naruto and quickly grabbed him up in his arms. He immediately received a very strong electrical shock that sent him falling back several feet. He quickly jumped up with a surprised look on his face. Anbu, get me Asuma, Hiruzen said. 2 shadows seemed to flicker off in the distance. Hiruzen waited near Naruto for several seconds. He then turned to the villagers with a pissed-off look on his face. If I find out that any of you did this to him, I will personally execute you and every single one of your family members. I will wipe your pathetic existence from the world if you did this. Hiruzen said. The villagers took a step back in fear. They knew that they did to do anything, but the pure anger in Hiruzen's voice made them truly believe that he would take the order through without hesitation and maybe a bit of pleasure. Asuma landed in the middle of the crowd. He looked at his father with a confused look on his face. Sarutobi pointed at Naruto. Asuma turned and saw the electrical currents coming off of Naruto. He nodded and then started to walk towards Naruto. He knelt down and held his arms out, and greenish glow started to surround his arm. He then slowly picked Naruto off of the ground. The electricity coming off of Naruto didn't seem to affect Asuma. Asuma made sure Naruto was secure and then jumped off towards the hospital. Once Sarutobi was sure Naruto was okay, he turned to the villagers. He had pure anger in his eyes. The villagers took a step back in fear when they saw the pure rage that was in their Hokage's eyes. Anbu, Hiruzen yelled. A squad of Anbu surrounded the crowd of villagers. Take every single one of these civilians to Ibiki and Anko. I don't want any of them released until they are absolutely positive that they did not do this. Hiruzen said. The crowd of civilians erupted in an uproar of disapproval. But they were quickly silenced with a look from Sarutobi. The Anbu grabbed 2 villagers by their shoulders and teleported them to the interrogation center. Hiruzen sighed and then turned to the hospital. He then took off towards it with incredible speed. At the hospital, Hiruzen arrived at the hospital and met an enraging sight. Asuma was still in the waiting room, arguing with the receptionist. It seemed like the receptionist would not allow Naruto in. Now normally Asuma would just push past her, but with an injured Naruto in his arms, he couldn't risk injuring her further. Asuma patience had been extremely tested in the last hour. First his father calls him during his vacation. He then finds out that Naruto had been extremely injured by an attack by the villagers. Asuma sprinted at full speed towards the hospital while trying not to jostle Naruto. When he arrived, he thought the worst part was over. Unfortunately he was wrong. This bitch of a receptionist would not allow him in with Naruto. It seems like they wouldn't heal the demon in this hospital. So for the 15 minutes, he had been arguing with her to let Naruto in. He didn't want to attack her in fear that if he left Naruto unattended, something would happen to him. Asuma was continuing to argue with the receptionist. Suddenly a blur shot past him and the receptionist suddenly disappeared. Asuma looked towards the direction that the blur shot to. He was surprised to see that his father was actually the unknown blur. Hiruzen had the receptionist pinned to the wall. His hands were enclosed around her throat. He turned back to Asuma. Go on, take him to operating room 9. I will send my personal doctor to deal with him. For now I will deal with this woman. Hiruzen said. Asuma nodded and then shot down the hallway. Hiruzen turned back to the receptionist. Her hands were scratching at his hand. You dare to refuse the treatment of a civilian. This comes under treason. For that you must be executed. Hiruzen said. His grip started to increase and the receptionist's face started to change color. Hiruzen's grip still increased and the receptionist's resistance slowly became weaker. Suddenly a crack was heard in the waiting area. The receptionist fell to the ground with her head leaning at an awkward angle. Hiruzen stood above her with a furious look. He then turned and walked into the hospital's hallway, leaving a wait room full of terrified people. Outside of Operation Room 9. Hiruzen stood outside of Operation Room 9 with Asuma by his side. Asuma had dropped him into the room and Hiruzen's doctor had immediately appeared behind him. He had kicked Asuma out of the room and started to operate on Naruto. That had been 2 hours ago. Now Hiruzen and Asuma were waiting for the results. Hiruzen's doctor came out of the room. He had sweat coming down his forehead. He looked tired and worried. He looked towards Hiruzen with a sad look on his face. Well, Hajime, what's wrong with him? Hiruzen asked. Hajime led them into the room. They saw that Naruto was currently laid in a hospital bed. Sparks were flying off of his skin. Well, I can safely tell you that nobody in this world did this to Naruto. Hajime said. Hiruzen looked in confusion. Hajime started to explain. You see, Naruto body seems to be overflowing with electrical energy. So much that it is actually producing sparks and giving them off. His body has literally been electrified. If I had to guess, he was probably struck by lightning. Hajime said. Hiruzen became even more shocked. He was struck by lightning. What did this do to his body? Is he going to be okay? Hiruzen asked. Hajime turned to Naruto. Normally when a person gets struck by lightning head-on, the heat would normally kill them instantly. Now if you were close to a lightning strike, the excess electricity that the lightning creates would enter your system and kill you then. And this happens if they are not directly hit. Naruto was hit head-on. This should have killed him instantly, but due to his occupant he managed to survive. The lightning entered his body and seemed to bound with his. The best example for him now is a living lightning bolt. Each one of his cell is electrically charged. His blood flow has sped up. And his nervous system, due to being receiving information via electrical charges, is now enhanced. The strangest part is his chakra though. The lightning seems to have bonded with his chakra. He will most definitely have a lightning nature. His chakra flow is extremely fast at this point. Hajime said. Hiruzen seemed to surprise at the news. So far, nothing seemed to be wrong with Naruto except for the physical damage. Also something strange has happened. Hajime said. Hajime reached for a scalpel and held it near Naruto. The scalpel seemed to shake and move towards Naruto. Hajime caught it before it could reach him. It seems like the excess lightning chakra has created a magnetic field around his body that attracts metal towards him. Hajime said. Hiruzen looked confused. To him all of this sounded like good news except for the magnetic field. So why was Hajime sad? Unfortunately the lightning also had some effects on his brain. The brain was overcharged with electrical energy, so it basically just stopped working. He is in a coma. Hajime said. Hiruzen looked in fear when he heard this news. His successor's son was now possibly brain dead. Is there anything we can do? Hiruzen asked. Normally we one try to shock his brain back into working, but due to the excess chakra just lying in there, we are not sure if it will overcharge it and he will die, or it could have some other effects. So we can do nothing for now. Hajime said. Hiruzen buried his face into his hands. Sobs escaped through his tough facade. Asuma rubbed Hiruzen back. I am sorry Hiruzen, but there is nothing we can do. All we can do is wait and hope. Hajime said. Hiruzen collected himself and stood up. Keep him attached to life support. I want daily updates on his condition. I will be in my office. Hiruzen said to Hajime. Hiruzen turned to Asuma. Asuma, you can go home if you would like. Hiruzen said. Asuma shook his head. No. No, I think I will stay for a little. Asuma said. Hiruzen nodded and then disappeared in a shunshin. Asuma walked into the room that contained Naruto. He slowly walked over to his bed. He looked down on him with a worried look on his face. Oh, Naruto. I hope you are okay. Asuma said. What Asuma didn't know was that Naruto was currently going through a very weird situation. Naruto's mindscape. Naruto lay face down in a shallow pool of water. He suddenly shot up with a confused look on his face. He looked around to see where he was. His surroundings looked similar to a sewer. Pipes ran through it. The only thing that was weird about it was that electricity seemed to be running and going through the pipe. Naruto also noticed that the water he was standing in had a slight electrical current. Where the heck am I? Naruto thought. Naruto shrugged and started to walk forward. The sewer still remained relatively same. The only thing that changed was the shape of the pipes. After what seemed like hours of walking, Naruto came upon a dead end. This dead end had a giant metal gate. The gate seemed to be held together by a piece of paper with strange designs on it. Naruto walked up to the cage with a confused look on his face. He squinted his eyes in an attempt to see farther in it. Unfortunately, he could see nothing. Suddenly, Naruto saw movement in the very back of the cage. A shadow seemed to be moving closer and closer towards the bars. Naruto slowly took a step back. Suddenly, a gigantic fur-covered hand shot out towards Naruto. Naruto closed his eyes in fear and anticipation. Instead of pain, Naruto heard a sizzling noise. He also heard a yelp of pain. Naruto slowly opened his eyes to see what happened. The giant fur-covered claw was now revealed to be connected to a giant fox. The fox had red fur and had nine tails flowing hypnotically behind it. Naruto stared in shock and awe at the gigantic creature. What do you want, boy? The fox asked with anger. Naruto just stared in shock. After several seconds of silence, the fox seemed to be getting agitated. It suddenly let out a loud roar that immediately shocked Naruto out of his frozen state. What was that for? Naruto asked. I asked you a question. I expect it to be answered intelligently, not with a dumb stare. The fox said. Naruto huffed in anger at the light insult. He then looked up at the fox with amazement in his eyes. Who are you? Naruto said. The fox seemed to contemplate whether or not it should answer. In the end, it decided it would. I am the Almight Kyuubi, leader and most powerful of the tailed beast. Kyuubi said. Naruto looked Kyuubi with confusion still masking his face. What are the tailed beasts? Naruto asked. The tailed beast are beast made completely of chakra. We terrorize and destroy the world. We are feared by everyone. Kyuubi said. Naruto nodded his head in understatement. He then started to look around the sewer. Where are we and why didn't you attack me? Naruto said. Kyuubi sighed in frustration. It really didn't feel like answering all these questions. But it decided to humor the boy. This is your mindscape, boy. It is a representation of your sanity and your happy place. Unfortunately, it is not so happy. And the reason I cannot attack you because of that infuriating lightning strike. Kyuubi said. Naruto understood everything up till the lightning strike. What lightning strike are you talking about? Naruto asked. You remember that bright light you saw before you fainted? Kurama said. Naruto nodded. Well, that was lightning. Due to my chakra running through you, you managed to survive the lightning strike. But the lightning had some effects on your body. That is why the water is electrified. Your body has electricity running all throughout it. Kyuubi said. Naruto looked in amazement at the new news. Unfortunately, you are in a coma right now, so it really doesn't matter what powers you have gained from it. Kyuubi said. Naruto's face suddenly dropped. He knew what a coma is because he had almost been put in one during one of his harsher beating. This was very bad news for him. Naruto then looked up at Kyuubi. One last question. Why are you here? The history books said that you were killed by the fourth Hokage. Naruto said. The Kyuubi sighed and sat down. Its tails were still moving hypnotically behind it. Your fourth Hokage didn't kill me. Nobody can kill a tailed beast. He actually sealed me inside of you. This is why the villagers hate you. Kyuubi said. Naruto looked in shock at the news. Why, you are the reason why everybody hates me? Naruto asked. Kyuubi let out a small laugh. Yes, I am, and I really don't give a fuck about it. It is not my fault that your stupid Hokage forget that containers are hated. Don't blame me, blame your Hokage. Kyuubi said. Naruto still looked in shock at the news. Now he knew why they hated him. Now he knew why they called him demon. Now he knew why he wasn't loved. It was all because of a stupid fox. Didn't I just tell you, Tad, it wasn't my fault? Now I know you really are stupid. Kyuubi. Naruto grew angry at Kyuubi's words. Well, fuck you. I will never allow you to escape this cage, you overgrown flea bag. Naruto said. Naruto felt a rush of wind blow past him as Kyuubi tried to attack. Once Kyuubi's claw got close, an arch of lightning came from the ceiling and shocked Kyuubi. He let out a low growl before slinking back into his cage. One day, boy, I will escape, and when that day comes, my claws shall taste the precious blood that remains in your defeated body. Kyuubi said. Naruto stuck his middle finger up and looked Kyuubi in the eyes. You will never escape. I'll train and become so powerful that you will have no choice but to submit to me. Naruto said. Kyuubi let out a gigantic laugh at this. Good luck doing that in a coma, dumbass. Kyuubi said. Naruto's attitude immediately deflated as that fact was once again thrust into his face. He sat down across from Kyuubi as he realized he could do nothing. All he could do was wait. 2 months later. It had been 2 months since Naruto had been sent in a coma. Things had changed extremely for Konoha. Hiruzen would let nobody except for him, Asuma and Hajime enter the room. He also made them swear to secrecy. The villagers thought that Naruto was dead and had celebrated 2 weeks into Naruto's coma. Hiruzen had immediately tried to stop the parties. Unfortunately, he could not barge into other people's houses and stop them from celebrating. The sounds of cheering and celebration haunted Hiruzen for weeks. In the hospital, nothing had really changed. Naruto was still hooked up to life support. His room was sealed off and only Hiruzen and Hajime were allowed in the room. Naruto lay motionless in his hospital bed. Of course, Hiruzen couldn't keep it completely quiet that Naruto was not dead. A small leak managed to get out to the public. Now, normally, most people would be happy if the person they hated were in a coma. Unfortunately for Naruto, Konoha civilians weren't normal. The villagers gathered together and started to charge the hospital. It was a quiet, dark night in Konoha. The village was calm. The lights were out, the children were sleeping, everything was fine. What is this? We find a large group seemingly sneaking through the village. If we take a closer look, we see that most of this group is made out of civilians due to their actual lack of stealth. The civilians slowly stalked their way towards the hospital. Once they reached it, one of the figures in the crowd stalked forward. It reached inside of their pockets and pulled out a key and unlocked the door to the hospital. No alarm was set off. The crowd slowly filed into the hospital waiting room. When the person who had the key made sure that everybody was in, they locked the door behind them. The person with the key then started to lead them through the winding halls of the hospital. They stopped in front of a room with a large 9 above the door. Okay, he is in room 9. A figure said in the crowd. The civilians all filed into the room. It was a tight fit, but they managed. They all surrounded Naruto with their makeshift weapon drawn. On the count of 3, We end this demon's life. The leader of the group said. All of the occupants of the room minus Naruto let out a yell of acceptance. 1. 2. Inside of the seal. For the past 2 months, a lot of things have changed between Naruto and Kyuubi. And by a lot, I mean a little. Kyuubi would repeatedly send insults towards Naruto that seemed to get more and more obscene with each one. Naruto would take the insults in stride and respond with his own. It was a hate-hate relationship. Naruto was currently sitting in an open field with his eyes closed. He had figured out how to change his mind's cape in the first month. He had changed it into a forest, reminiscent of the forest of death, but the sunlight managed to reach the floor. Unfortunately for Kyuubi, he decided not to let him get to much freedom. Kyuubi was attached to a gigantic tree that was larger than him. He had a very short leash that stopped him from doing anything. Suddenly Naruto heard Kyuubi let out a low laugh. Naruto looked at him with confusion. Hey dumbass, some of your oh so precious villagers are attacking your body. Kyuubi said. Naruto flinched in fear. What am I going to do? Naruto said. Kyuubi gave off a loud yawn before stretching lazily. Fuck if I care. Deal with it yourself. Kyuubi said before going further into his cage. Naruto sighed and started to rack his in an attempt to think of a way to escape his coma. Suddenly a kanji appeared in front of him. After struggling to decipher the kanji, due to his lack of education, finally managed to understand it. It said lightning. Naruto, not having any other options, hit the kanji and it disappeared in a spray of electricity. Outside in the real world. 3. The villager said. All of the villagers jumped at Naruto. But suddenly they heard a loud boom that froze them all in their tracks. Only now did they take into account of the sparks that were flying off of Naruto. Oh shit. One of the villagers said. They heard a loud rumble and saw a bright flash of light. The last thing they felt was intense pain. The last thing they saw was Naruto getting struck by lightning, again. With the Hokage. The past 2 months had been hell for the Hokage. The day after Naruto was struck by lightning, the news that he was in a coma was immediately spread into the village. Of course the villagers thought he was dead. Celebration was spread throughout the village. Ninja and civilians alike celebrated the death of Naruto Uzumaki. Hiruzen immediately ran into the streets to stop the celebration. The only thing he managed to do was to send the celebrations into the villagers' houses. Yes, things had not been good for Hiruzen. Hiruzen was staring out of his window on a late clear night. He had not been able to get much sleep in the last 2 months. He had opted to stare out of the windows onto the village. Honestly, he was really staring at the hospital that contained Naruto. He really wondered when he would come out of his coma or if he even would. Hiruzen sound a weird occurrence start to appear over the hospital. Black clouds started to swirl over the hospital. Hiruzen then heard a loud blast of thunder. He flinched as the thunder almost deafened him. Suddenly he saw a red lightning bolt come soaring out of the clouds. The lightning broke through the roof of the hospital and seemed to reach towards the ground floor. Naruto. Hiruzen whispered before disappearing in a burst of speed. At the hospital, villagers lay dead surrounding Naruto's bed. Naruto groggily rose from his bed. He opened his eyes and the first sight that greeted him were the dead bodies of some of his more outspoken haters. Strangely, he didn't feel remorse. He actually felt happiness, excitement maybe. Naruto did not understand why he felt happy about seeing these people dead. Hiruzen crashed through the window. He looked around the room and was surprised to see the huge amount of dead civilians. He was also surprised to see that Naruto was actually awake. Naruto-kun, what happened? Did you see that lightning bolt? Hiruzen said. Naruto slowly turned around and the shock that greeted Hiruzen's eyes was surprising. Naruto's once blue eyes were now electrifying yellow. What's wrong, Oji-san? Naruto said. Nothing, Naruto-kun. Just go back to sleep. Hiruzen said. Just awoken from a coma, Naruto was actually still tired. So he happily agreed and laid back to sleep. Hiruzen silently signaled his Anbu and picked up the dead bodies around Naruto. They noticed that parts of their bodies were melted. They were confused on what killed them, but regardless picked up the bodies and took them away. In Naruto's mindscape, Naruto reawakened inside of his mindscape. He saw the Kyuubi was still sitting there patiently for him. Surprised to see that you aren't dead yet, Kyuubi said. Naruto stuck his tongue out and then stretched. He laid his body against the soft ground and promptly fell to sleep. Kyuubi stared at Naruto with malice in his eyes. Your ignorance shall be my freedom, Kyuubi said. The next morning, Naruto woke up the next morning. He lazily stretched his muscles and jumped out of bed. He rushed out of his door and immediately slammed into a nurse. The nurse started to apologize, but then she saw whom she was actually apologizing to. Hey boy, get back into your room, the nurse said. Naruto stuck out his tongue and sped away. The nurse noticed that Naruto was actually faster than most kids his age, ninja or not, should be. Naruto sped through the villagers, running in between adults' legs and zigzagging through the crowds. He noticed that he seemed much faster than usual. To the villagers who watched Naruto, they noticed that he was leaving a yellow outline of himself when he ran. Mind. After several minutes of running, Naruto arrived at the only restaurant, if it could be called that actually served him. Naruto plopped himself onto a chair. Ayame-chan, I am back, Naruto yelled. A young woman stepped out from the back of the restaurant. The woman had long, brown hair with brown eyes and fair skin. She wore a white robe with the sleeves folded with a dark blue apron. Naruto-kun, it's so nice to see you. Where were you? How are you? Are you okay? Ayame said as she ran over to Naruto and gave him a hug. I'm okay, Ayame-chan. I was just in a coma, Naruto said cheerfully. Ayame let out a sweat drop at the way Naruto just said he was in a coma. She decided to drop it and start on Naruto's regular order. You should rape her. She has a fine figure, Kyuubi said within Naruto's mind. Naruto looked around in fear at first, thinking that the Kyuubi had broken free. But after seeing no traces of the gigantic demonic fox, Naruto figured the fox was speaking from his seal. Stop talking in my mind, Naruto yelled out loud. Ayame and the rest of the occupants of the stand looked at him with confusion. When they saw what spoke out loud, they returned to their meals, ignoring the demon brat. Hiruzen walked into the ramen shop minutes after Naruto started to eat. He sat down in the seat next to him and placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto, I know that you were kicked out of the orphanage and I apologize for that. But I found you a new apartment and I have a surprise for you, Hiruzen said. Naruto stopped eating and slurped the last bit of ramen that was in his mouth. He turned to Hiruzen. What is it, Oji-san? Naruto said. Naruto, how would you like to join the Ninja Academy? Hiruzen said. Of course I want to join, Naruto yelled before hugging Hiruzen. Hiruzen chuckled and let Naruto hug him. It was the least he could for the boy. That is good. Now let's get you to your new apartment, Hiruzen said. Hiruzen paid for Naruto's meal and walked out of the stand with Naruto. While Naruto was walking through the streets, he noticed the looks of hatred he was getting from the villagers. 2 months ago he would have shied away from looks. But now for some reason, the looks agitated him. He was pissed. Naruto raised his middle finger and flipped off all of the villagers. The villagers looked in shock as a 5-year-old just flipped them off. Hiruzen saw what Naruto was doing and stopped walking to scold him. Kill them all. Give them a reason to hate you. Make them fear you, Kyuubi said. Naruto shook his head to get Kyuubi's voice out of his head. Naruto-kun, you should not do that to the villagers. You should respect them, Hiruzen said. Naruto fiercely turned to Hiruzen. Hiruzen noticed that he had passion burning in his eyes. No, not anymore, Oji-san. I am tired of dealing with their bullshit. I am not going to lie down and take it anymore. If they want to give me those dirty looks, I will feel free to do the same, Naruto said. Hiruzen looked in shock at Naruto's declaration. I am tired of it, Oji-san. I am not taking it anymore. I am Naruto Uzumaki, damn it. And I am not going to take their shit anymore. Naruto said. Naruto and Hiruzen didn't know, but that proclamation started a ripple through the ninja world. That proclamation had sent the ninja world. The boy struck by lightning was about to be introduced onto the ninja world. It had been 3 weeks since Naruto had awakened from his coma. After his outburst with Hiruzen, Hiruzen had taken him to his new apartment. The apartment wasn't anything too special, but it was perfect for Naruto. It had a small kitchen with a single bedroom. It had plenty of closet space with a living room that was big enough to fit a TV and a couch. Naruto immediately fell in love with the apartment. It was stocked fully with food and bookshelves that contained books concerning first-year academy education. Naruto was now outside facing a tree with a determined look on his face. You see, most 5-year kids spend their time playing with their friends or their toys. But Naruto was different. He had been pushed around too much in his opinions. So he drove himself into training. The first thing he realized was that his chakra control was shit. It took him almost 3 full weeks to get the leaf exercise together. This consisted of him trying to stick a leaf or several leaves on his body using only his chakra. Most of the time the leaf would blow away as soon as it made contact with his skin. But Naruto was not undeterred. After weeks of training he managed to get the leaves on his body. But now he faced his greatest challenge so far. Tree climbing. Now, just from the title, most people would think this was a simple task even for civilians. Unfortunately for young ninjas in training, this was a hard task. Naruto had to use chakra to stick himself onto the tree and climb up it. This was a chakra control exercise that was meant to sharpen his chakra control. Naruto took off running off towards the tree. Naruto sped towards the tree with lightning fast speed, at least for a 5-year-old. He approached the tree and slammed his foot against it. His other foot slammed roughly against the bark. Naruto took another step that sent him several more feet up the tree. Naruto was about to take another step when he felt himself losing grip. No, Naruto said. Naruto's foot slipped off from the tree. His hands were thrown into the air in an attempt to grab a branch to hold him up. Unfortunately, there was nothing for him to hold. Naruto slammed roughly into the ground back first. He groaned in pain as waves of it were sent through his body. In the back of his mind he could hear Kyuubi laughing at his pain. "Oh, you shut up, you stupid fox," Naruto said. This only made Kyuubi laugh even more. Naruto stood up and looked at the tree. One day I will conquer you. I will defeat you, almighty tree. You and your children saplings will bow down to me," Naruto said. The tree obviously did not answer Naruto. This only pissed Naruto off. Naruto heard some more chuckling from behind him. He turned around with an angry look on his face because he thought the other trees were mocking him. Instead it was Hiruzen. Naruto's face split into a wide grin. "Hey Oji-san," Naruto said. Naruto ran over and gave Hiruzen a hug. Hiruzen returned the hug. "Naruto, how would you like to go shopping for the Ninja Academy?" Hiruzen asked. Naruto let out choruses of yeses. Hiruzen laughed. "Okay, get yourself washed up and meet me outside of the apartment," Hiruzen said. Naruto yelled and ran into the house. 5 minutes later, Naruto bounded out of the house with shorts and a t-shirt on. His smile was beaming because he was excited to get some new things. Naruto ran up to Hiruzen and started to drag him through the village. Halfway through, Hiruzen flipped the positions and dragged Naruto to a weapons store. The weapons store was named Yamashita's Weapons. Naruto and Hiruzen walked through the doors of the store. The door had a bell connected to it and it rung. The shoppers in the store all looked towards the newcomers. Their smiles grew when they saw Hiruzen but immediately fell when they saw Naruto. Hiruzen frowned and led Naruto through the store. Naruto marveled at the variety of weapons in the store. He completely ignored the looks from the other shoppers. Naruto ran from wall to wall in an attempt to soak up all of the weapons he could. He saw claws, gauntlet, swords, shurikens, kunai, branch sword, axes, arrows, bows and seals. Naruto enjoyed every second of the experience. Hiruzen noticed that whenever Naruto got close to a weapon, it would vibrate and seem to start moving towards him. Luckily the weapons were secured so Hiruzen didn't worry. Hiruzen in the meanwhile had walked up to the counter and started to talk to the owners. He noticed that the rest of the shoppers were still giving Naruto dirty looks. He also noticed that Naruto didn't seem to really care. He found that relieving and worrying. But he decided to think about that later. Hiruzen made it to the front desk and rung the bell. After several seconds a middle-aged man walked out of back of the store. "Ah Sanji, it is so nice to see you," Hiruzen said. "So nice to see you too Hiruzen," Sanji said. The two exchanged a handshake and Hiruzen leaned onto the counter. "So why are you here Hiruzen? I doubt you need any weapon except for your staff," Sanji said jokingly. Hiruzen laughed and then pointed at Naruto. Sanji followed his finger and saw Naruto. His smile fell when he saw Naruto. Hiruzen's smile fell when he saw this. "Do you have a problem with Naruto Sanji? 'Cause if you do then we are going to have a problem," Hiruzen said. Sanji waved his hands in protest. No, I don't have a problem with him. I have a problem with the way he is being treated. That boy is a hero. He doesn't deserve the type of treatment he gets," Sanji said. Hiruzen let out a sigh of relief. "Good. I wouldn't want our friendship to be ended by such a petty thing. Now I need to find Naruto a weapon. Something lightweight and fast for his small stature," Hiruzen said. "I think I have Ju." Sanji was interrupted when Naruto slammed the blade on the counter. "I want it," Naruto said. Hiruzen and Sanji looked at the blade. The sword was a scimitar that split off into two sharp ends. It wasn't too curved but was still very deadly. It was light and perfect for someone like Naruto. "Ah, this was the weapon I was actually about to get you," Sanji said. Naruto completely ignored the man while staring at the sword. Sanji laughed when he saw this. Hiruzen chuckled when he saw the way Naruto stared at the blade. "It seems like Naruto has really found his weapon," Hiruzen said. Sanji chuckled and then rung up the weapon. "That will be 1,000 yen," Sanji said. Yen equals dollars. Hiruzen looked at Sanji with shock. He knew that he had to pay this with his own money since the council would have a fit if they found out that he was spending money on Naruto. "Hey Sanji, can I get a discount? You know, for your old friend?" Hiruzen asked. Sanji gave Hiruzen a look. The look that said, "Don't fuck with me." Hiruzen sighed in defeat. He knew Sanji was cheap and wouldn't let money slip out of his pockets. Hiruzen dug his hand into his robe and took out his wallet. He reluctantly took out 1,000 yen. He placed it on the counter in defeat. Sanji chuckled evilly before taking the 1,000 yen. "Thank you for your wonderful purchase. Please feel free to browse more," Sanji said. Hiruzen groaned in defeat when he realized that he actually had to buy more stuff in the store. Sanji's wares may be expensive as hell but they were good quality. Hiruzen started to lead Naruto once again through the store. Naruto paid no attention to him as he looked at his new sword. The sword had carvings in it that seemed to meld at the handle. Naruto swung it once and he heard a swoosh sound from the sword. Naruto loved the sword. Hiruzen had finally managed to drag Naruto to the clothing section. Seeing that Naruto was still distracted, Hiruzen decided to pick out his cloths. He brought him several pairs of a pure black shirt and several pairs of navy blue pants. He brought him shinobi sandals and several sets of kunai and shuriken. He then led Naruto back up to the counter. "That will be 2,500 yen," Sanji said with a smirk on his face. At this point Hiruzen was basically dying at the prices. He once again reluctantly took out his wallet and paid Sanji. Sanji gleefully took the money and began to seal the objects into a scroll. By this point, Naruto had finally gotten out of the shock of getting a new object. He looked up at Hiruzen with tears in his eyes. Hiruzen looked confused. Didn't Naruto enjoy his new gifts? "Why are you crying Naruto-kun?" Hiruzen asked. Naruto let out a couple of sniffles before looking up at Hiruzen with a smile on his face. "I'm not sad Oji-san. This is just the first time anybody has gotten anything for me. Naruto said. Hiruzen smiled sadly and then kneeled down. He engulfed Naruto in a hug for several seconds before releasing him. Naruto whipped away his tear and then took his new clothes. Hiruzen thanked Sanji and then started to lead Naruto out through the store. The shoppers who had actually stayed in the store looked at Naruto in disgust as he happily skipped out of the store. Hiruzen led Naruto out of the store and onto the streets. It seemed like several villagers had been waiting for Hiruzen to exit. A crowd of civilians surrounded Naruto and Hiruzen. Hokage-sama, why are you buying this brat ninja clothes? Please don't tell me that you are planning to enroll him in the ninja academy. If so, then I can't allow my child to attend the same class as the boy. A random civilian said. Hiruzen frowned. Now he wasn't really frustrated with the statement the man made. He had actually been dealing with that all morning when he told the council he would be enrolling Naruto. He was angry that this civilian had the nerve to say it right into Naruto's face. Hiruzen looked at Naruto to make sure he was okay. He was surprised to see that Naruto looked more angry than mad. Hiruzen then remembered what Naruto had said early and smirked. Well, Naruto-kun, seeing as you were so stern on your earlier proclamation, why don't I let you handle this situation? Hiruzen said. Naruto looked up in shock at what his Oji-san. He seemed to mad at him yesterday, but now he was actually encouraging him. Naruto grinned and then nodded at Hiruzen. He then turned to the crowd of civilians with a fierce look on his face. First of all, I would to say that you are all pathetic in my eyes. Naruto started off with. All of the villagers flinched in surprise. Even Hiruzen was surprised at Naruto's bold language. You all hate a 5-year-old so much that you allow it to affect your life. That is very stupid. I have seen animals that have more smarts than you people. Now please get out of our way so I can go try on my new clothes. Naruto finished. All of the villagers stood in shock at Naruto's new attitude. Hiruzen was quietly laughing behind his hand at the villager's face. After several minutes of silence and having an intense stare down, one of the bigger civilians stepped forward with a pissed-off look on his face. Why don't you shut up, you demon brat? You are pathetic and should have died with your whore of a mother and that bitch of a father you had. The villager said. Kill that pathetic waste of space. Kyuubi yelled within his mind. The man puffed out his chest and closed his eyes. The villagers behind him had smirks on their faces, thinking that he had just put the demon in his place. Hiruzen stood quietly behind Naruto. He was very pissed at the moment but wanted to see how Naruto would react. The man still had his eyes closed as he waited for the brats to retort. What he didn't know was that he had made a very bad mistake. Naruto had his head down and his hair shadowed his eyes. If someone looked closely, they could see sparks flying off of his skin. The sparks started to become more visible as Naruto seemed to get angrier. After several seconds, even the civilians could see the sparks coming off of Naruto. The man started to get tired of waiting. It seems like the brat isn't as too. The man wasn't able to finish as he saw Naruto speeding towards him. Naruto reached the man and buried his whole fist into the man's stomach. Naruto was so fast that the Anbu that were watching the situation lost track of him until he stopped moving. Naruto's punch was so powerful that it lifted the man off his feet. While the man was in midair, Naruto twisted his body. He moved his fist back down to the ground and man followed him. The man roughly slammed into the ground with a solid thud. Naruto retracted his fist and looked at the man. The man was groaning in pain, but he would also twitch at random occurrences. Don't you ever, and I mean ever, talk about my parents. I want you to tell this to all of your friends that seem to hold a grudge against me. I am not taking it anymore. From now on I am going to protect myself. Naruto said before sliding back next to Hiruzen. Humph. It's not killing, but it's good enough, for now. Kyuubi said. Hiruzen stood in shock at Naruto's speed and power. A 5-year-old had managed to lift a grown man off of his feet. He was also surprised at the sparks that seemed to be coming off of Naruto. It seemed like whatever effects Naruto got from the lightning, it was permanent. Good job, Naruto-kun. Hiruzen said while ruffling Naruto's hair. Hiruzen smiled and then turned to the group of civilians. As for you guy, I honestly don't care whether or not your bigotry will not allow your children to join Naruto in learning the ninja arts. Hiruzen said. Hiruzen then turned to the down man. And as for you, I will not be arresting you today. I think the aspect of you getting your beat by a 5-year-old is punishment enough for a man like you. Hiruzen said with a smirk on his face. The man let out a groan of pain and completely ignored Hiruzen. Hiruzen stood up and then looked at Naruto. Well, why don't we go home, Naruto-kun? Hiruzen asked. Naruto nodded and Hiruzen led him through the stunned crowd. The villagers who were watching from a distance still threw Naruto looks of anger and disgust. But now Naruto would respond with his own looks or a middle finger. After several minutes, Naruto finally arrived at his home. After saying goodbye to Hiruzen, he entered his apartment. He put away his new clothes and got into his bed. It was a little early for him to go to sleep, but he was tired. Naruto fell asleep with a smile on his face. Naruto's mindscape. Naruto opened his eyes to see himself back in his mindscape. He saw Kyuubi lazily sitting in his cage. When Kyuubi saw Naruto, he let out a low growl. What the hell do you want, you damn brat? Kyuubi said. Why can't we just be friends, Kyuubi-san? Naruto asked innocently. Kyuubi's claw came flying out of the cage and at Naruto. But once again an arch of lightning stopped it. It's because I want to kill you, idiot. I am the Nine-Tails Fox, a being made completely of chakra and hatred. I don't want to be your friend. The only reason I am even conversing with you is because I can't kill you. As soon as I escape, I shall feast upon your bones and quench my thirst with your blood. Kyuubi yelled. Naruto, seeing that the Kyuubi wouldn't change, became mad. Well, fine. You can sit here and rot in this cage. You'll never get out. Naruto yelled. Kyuubi chuckled and sat down on its 4 legs. Even if I don't escape, boy, I will make your life hell. You can never escape me, boy. We are sealed, and for as long as that remains true, I will make sure to torture you. Now get out of my presence. Kyuubi said before realizing a powerful roar. The roar blasted Naruto back into the darkness that seemed to inhabit his mind and out of his mindscape. Real world. Naruto shot out of his bed with sweat covering his body. After collecting himself, Naruto started his day. He put on a pair of his new clothes and ran straight outside to his dreaded enemy, the tree. He took a running start and put his foot onto the tree. He continued to slowly climb up the tree, 1 foot at a time. After several seconds, he finally made it to the top. He began to cheer in excitement. Unfortunately, he lost his concentration and fell back to the ground. He slammed back first into the ground. He groaned in pain and anger. Naruto jumped back up and attempted to walk up the tree again. This time he was successful and he was able to walk back down. Naruto continued this for half an hour. After that, he was satisfied that he had gotten down tree climbing. It was also at that exact moment that Hiruzen came into Naruto's backyard. Hey Naruto-kun. It's good to see you practicing your ninja techniques. Hiruzen said. Naruto turned around in surprise and smiled when he saw that his Oji-san was there. Thank you, Oji-san. I want to be the best ninja in Konoha. I need to practice. Naruto said. Hiruzen chuckled at Naruto's enthusiasm. That's good to know, Naruto-kun. I just wanted to tell you that the Ninja Academy starts in 2 weeks. Hiruzen said. Naruto nodded. Once Hiruzen made sure he was okay, he shunshined away, leaving Naruto to his thought. I am going to need to step up my training. Naruto thought. Well, trial and error hasn't failed me yet. Naruto said before diving back into his training with more vigor. 1 week and 6 days later. Naruto had gone through some rigorous training. He would force himself to go through different exercises such as push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, chin-ups. After finishing his physical exercises, he would then go into his house and read up on his books. Although Naruto hated reading, he knew that he had to learn, in order to do well at the academy. That had been Naruto's schedule for the past 2 weeks. But tonight was the night before his first day of the Ninja Academy. Naruto decided to rest his body and mind. Naruto had set his clothes out and decided to go to sleep. Kyuubi also decided to let him get a full sleep so he didn't bring him into the mindscape. Unfortunately, tonight was not the right night for that. Outside of Naruto's apartment, a small group of civilians and low-level ninja had gathered outside of Naruto's apartment. Now this is the last chance for us to stop that demon from joining our children in that academy. I don't know about you guys, but I will not allow my daughter to stay in the same class as the demon. A man said. Once we got a closer look, we realized it was the same man that Naruto had attacked in the street. The small crowd of villagers let out a quiet yell of agreement. Once the man made sure that everybody was ready, he quietly snuck up to the apartment door. He kicked it open and the small crowd gathered into Naruto's living room. After several seconds of searching, they managed to find Naruto's bedroom. They all gathered in it and prepared to attack him. In Naruto's dream, Naruto was currently having a very pleasant dream. He was swimming in a pool of ramen. He had Ayame, the nice blonde lady that took him to the hospital once, and the nice lady with the purple hair that took care of him once, serving him ramen naked. Guess the two characters. Pretty easy. Now this may seem like a weird dream for a 5-year-old to have, but Naruto was no normal 5-year-old. All in all, Naruto was enjoying his dream. Naruto was currently nestled up to the lady with the blonde hair. Ayame was sitting to his right while the lady with the purple hair was to his left. Ayame was in the middle of feeding Naruto when his eyes suddenly snapped open. His dream dissolved in front of him and he was thrown back into the real world. In the real world, Naruto's eyes suddenly snapped open and he was greeted to a not-so-pleasant sight. He was surrounded by what seemed to be civilians and low-level ninja. They all stared at them and he stared back at them. It was a pretty awkward situation. What are you people doing in my apartment? Naruto asked. We are here to end your existence, demon. The same man said. All of the villagers cheered and then started to attack Naruto. Each one of the villagers had some type of weapons. They raised them in an attempt to attack Naruto. Unfortunately for both Naruto and the villagers, Naruto had not learned to fully control his magnetic field. Also, most of the weapons were metal. As the villagers came down with their weapons, they started to shake and slipped right out of the villagers' hands. The sight of over 30 weapons flying towards him woke Naruto up. He quickly sped out of his bed with his pajamas on. Naruto landed on his floor several feet away from the crowd. He growled and then shot towards his closet. He returned out of it with his scimitar. Naruto then charged the villager. Yes. Spill their blood. Paint your walls with it. Kyuubi yelled with glee. The first person Naruto met was a civilian. Naruto appeared with his scimitar ready to slash the civilian. The civilian threw a sloppy punch that Naruto ducked under. While Naruto was crouched, he stabbed his scimitar into the villager's stomach. He retracted the sword and then dodged the falling body of the villager. Suddenly the small group of 5 genin jumped in front of Naruto. One of them threw a haymaker at Naruto's body. Naruto dodged to his left, but the other genin was waiting for him. Naruto slashed, but that genin countered with his kunai. The two were now engaged in a power struggle. Unfortunately for the genin, his kunai was metal. Naruto closed his eyes and the sparks started to come off of his skin stronger. Suddenly the genin started to shake randomly. The genin fell to the ground, twitching randomly. Naruto had managed to shock the genin using the electricity that came off his body. Naruto had no time enjoy his slight victory because of the other 4 genins. He turned around and saw 2 of the genins were flying towards him. Naruto held his palm up towards the one of the genin as he was flying to him. Suddenly a bolt of lightning came shooting out of his hand. The genin, being in midair, was not able to dodge to bolt. He fell to the ground, a twitching and burning mess. Naruto then had to duck under the other flying genin. The genin managed to kick Naruto's sword out of his hand in midair, then landed on his feet and then jumped right back at Naruto. Naruto was about to jump up and dodge the genin, but he felt a growing heat on his back. Naruto figured it was a fireball and decided to dive right. The jumping genin slid under the fireball as the fireball hit Naruto's apartment wall. The apartment wall was immediately set ablaze. When Naruto saw that his apartment was once again about to be burned down, he started to get mad. His sparks started to become more visible. Naruto disappeared from the ninja's sight. The two ninja were confused at where Naruto was. Suddenly Naruto appeared in front of one of genin. His fist was covered in lightning. Naruto punched the genin and sent him flying into a wall. Naruto then threw another punch, but the genin dodged. Naruto continued to throw punches, but the genin dodged. The genin finally threw a punch that sent Naruto flying through the burning wall. Naruto landed roughly in the streets of Konoha. The two remaining genins appeared in front of Naruto with smirks on their face. The civilians that were in the apartment had filed out when they saw that the apartment was burning down. Now they watched from the sidelines as the ninja dealt with Naruto. Well, looks how far the demon has fallen. Any last words? One of the genin said. Naruto said nothing but closed his eyes. The genin took this as a sign of defeat and took out a kunai. Naruto opened his eyes and saw the kunai. His eyes suddenly brightened as if he had an idea. Suddenly sparks started to fly off of Naruto. This was the biggest amount that anybody had ever seen. The kunai came whizzing out of the genin's hand. Naruto moved his body so the kunai dug into his shoulder. The genin looked in surprise. Suddenly the genin heard a crash noise behind him. He turned around and saw that Naruto's scimitar was rocketing towards him. The scimitar buried itself hilt deep inside of the genin's chest. The other genin looked in shock as he saw that his partner had just died. Naruto saw that the other genin was distracted and quickly pulled the kunai out of his shoulder. He threw it and it buried itself into the other genin's stomach. The surrounding civilians stood in shock that Naruto had just killed and injured 5 genins. Hiruzen landed in front of the scene several seconds later. He was shocked to see Naruto kneeling down on the ground with the bodies of 2 genins next to him. He was also surprised to see that Naruto's new apartment was now set ablaze. Naruto-kun, what happened? Hiruzen said. These people attacked me while I was asleep. I defended myself, but one of them set my apartment on fire. Naruto said with tears in his eyes. He was upset that he had already lost his new apartment. Defending myself? Ha! You know you enjoyed every moment of killing those pathetic flesh bags. Kyuubi said. Shut up, Kyuubi. Naruto yelled within his mind. I'll shut up when you finally admit you enjoyed killing these humans. Kyuubi said. Hiruzen glanced at the dead bodies. He secretly signaled his Anbu to take the dead to the medical center and take the injured and surrounding civilians to the interrogation and torture department. The Anbu dropped from the roof and took the civilians and ninja away. Why don't you stay with me tomorrow? You can stay with me until we find you somewhere else to live. Hiruzen said. Naruto nodded and then Hiruzen took them away back to his house. Hiruzen got Naruto to sleep and then Sunshine to the IATD. When he got there, all of the civilians and ninja were in separate cells. A man stood in the middle of all of it. The man was tall and very intimidating. He had a bandana on and a scar running down his eyes. His face seemed to be set in stone. He had a black overcoat on. He was Ibiki, leader of the IATD. What can you tell me, Ibiki? Hiruzen asked. A lot actually. They all seemed excited to tell about how they almost killed the demon. The man Naruto embarrassed weeks ago seemed to put together the group. They waited till tonight and attacked. Their reason was because they didn't want Naruto learning the ninja arts. The genin did most of the work. Naruto killed each of the dead ninja and civilians. Ibiki said. Hiruzen nodded. Execute them all. Hiruzen said. Ibiki raised his eyebrow at this but nonetheless gave the order. Suddenly black gas filled the room. Screams could be heard coming from the cells. After about 20 seconds the screams stopped. The smoke was sucked out and nothing remained of the bodies. Hiruzen nodded in satisfaction. He said goodbye to Ibiki and Sunshine back home. He made sure Naruto was still asleep and returned to bed himself. Things were starting to get very interesting for Konoha. Last night was a very hectic night for Naruto. He was attacked by a group of villagers and shinobi. His new apartment and all of his new clothes were burnt down. And he had killed several people last night. The fact that he had actually killed someone came to him during the middle of the night. Strangely, he felt no remorse but only satisfaction that he had defended himself. After a while, he thought nothing of it and went back to sleep. But today was a very important day for Naruto. It was his first day at the Ninja Academy. Hiruzen had woken him up early and got him a new set of clothes. Now he was heading out towards the Ninja Academy. The villagers were still giving him dirty looks, but right now Naruto didn't care. All he was thinking about was how awesome his classes were going to be. After a 10-minute walk, he finally arrived at the Ninja Academy. It seemed like the teachers were not allowing anybody in yet. So every student and their parents were now waiting outside of the academy. As soon as Naruto stepped onto the campus, everyone's eyes landed on him. Naruto stood nervously as hundreds of eyes seemed to try to pierce into his soul. Slowly Naruto could see the piercing eyes turn into disgusted sneers. It seemed like each one of the parents hated Naruto. Naruto slowly put his head down to avoid the stares. After several seconds, one of the civilian parents decided to confront Naruto. "What are you doing here, demon?" The civilian said. "No matter what you do, no matter how much you help them, they will always hate you. In their eyes all they see is a demon. You are pathetic if you think you can change that," Kyuubi said in a mocking voice. Naruto growled but quickly composed himself. He turned to civilian with a wide smile on his face that seemed to scream innocence. "I came here to learn like your children," Naruto said. "Don't act like you are like my children, you disgusting piece of trash," the civilian said. Naruto clenched his fist in anger. He knew that he couldn't attack the civilians just because of insults. "Who says you couldn't? If they insulted me, I would have tore through their bodies," Kyuubi said. "Look, I just want to learn. Please leave me alone and return to your children," Naruto said. The civilian kneeled down and came face to face with Naruto. "Are you threatening me, brat?" the civilian said while in Naruto's face. Naruto got closer and squinted his eyes in anger. "No, I'm advising you to go back to your children before you embarrass yourself," Naruto said. The civilian huffed and then reeled back his arm. He was about to punch Naruto, but his arm was stopped by a ninja. The civilian looked back at the ninja and the ninja shook its head at him. The civilian huffed again before lowering his arm. He shot Naruto a dirty look again before returning to his family. Naruto decided to leave the man alone and waited for the teacher to address the students. For now he had to deal with the massive amount of dirty he was receiving from the parents of the students. "I really hoped he punched you. I want to see you kill again," Kyuubi said. After several minutes of pure agony for Naruto, the principal of the school came out to address the students and their parents. "Hello everybody. Today is a wonderful day for Konoha. For today we shall start the education of another great generation of Konoha ninja," the principal said. A roar of cheer from both the parents and students rang through the village. It seemed like everybody was excited for the start of his or her ninja careers. The principal nodded at the obvious excitement. "Well, I won't keep you waiting anymore. Students, file into the academy. A genin will guide you to your assigned classroom," the principal said. The students said their last goodbyes to their parents before running into the building. Naruto decided to wait for everybody to go in before going in himself. After several minutes, Naruto decided to go in. The lobby of the academy was still filled with students. He could see several students his age going in a certain direction and decided to follow them. After going through what seemed to be a maze of hallways, they finally arrived at their classroom. The genin guide led them in and closed the door when everybody was inside. Waiting for them in the room was a teacher. The teacher seemed very young. He had pineapple-shaped hair and a scar going across his nose. He had a gentle smile on his face. Hello everyone, I am Iruka Yumino, but you can call me Iruka Sensei or Yumino Sensei. I will be your teacher during your time at the Ninja Academy. Iruka said. The class nodded and started to file into the seats. Naruto, using his advanced speed, managed to get the seat that was directly in the corner. Iruka made sure everybody was seated and started to go through roll. Naruto decided to lay his head down until his name was called. Naruto Uzu. Maki. Iruka said hesitantly. Looks like your teacher is another one of your haters. Kyuubi said. Naruto raised his head and said here. When he raised his head he came eye to eye with Iruka. Naruto could see a lot of hate hidden in his eyes. Naruto sighed before laying his head back down. This was not going to be a very good experience for Naruto. Later that day, Naruto barged into the Sarutobi clan home with his head down. He marched towards his appointed room and slammed the door behind him. He would not answer for anybody, even Asuma. Hokage Tower. Hiruzen was currently buried under the bane of all leaders, paperwork. It seemed like he was getting a lot of complaints with Naruto going to the academy this morning. Suddenly Asuma barged into Hiruzen's office. Now usually Hiruzen would be mad, but he was currently in the need of a break. What's wrong, Asuma-kun? Hiruzen said. When Naruto got home from the academy today, he immediately locked himself in his room. I suspect something bad happened to him at the academy today. Asuma said. Hiruzen sighed and nodded. He had figured something would go wrong today. I understand. Leave him alone until I get home. I'll try to see if I can coax him out of his room. Hiruzen said. Asuma nodded and then shunshined away. Hiruzen sighed and then got back to his paperwork. Couple hours later, Hiruzen had finally left his office and was now on his way home. The whole time he was doing paperwork, he was also worrying about Naruto. Hiruzen arrived at his house and walked through the doors. Asuma and his grandson Konohamaru immediately greeted him. He waved hello before going upstairs to Naruto. Hiruzen arrived at Naruto's room. He lightly knocked on the door. He got no response. Naruto-kun, it's me, Hiruzen said softly. Hiruzen waited several seconds and then heard a click. He twisted the handle of the door and was in. He saw Naruto was sitting on his bed with his head down. Hiruzen sat on the bed next to Naruto. Naruto, what happened at the academy? Hiruzen asked. Naruto remained quiet for a while before lifting his head. They kicked me out. As soon as the teacher saw me, he kicked me out of the room. He said I didn't deserve to learn in his class. I wasn't even allowed to attend the first lesson. Naruto said. Stop bitching about it, you fucking. If they annoy you, just kill them. Kyuubi said. Hiruzen's fist tightened to an extreme measure. He had assigned Iruka to teach Naruto because he thought he was able to get over his hatred for him. Obviously that did not happen. It's okay, Naruto-kun. Your teacher was just acting stupid. I promise it won't happen again. Hiruzen said. You say that, but it will happen. These villagers hate me. One day the villagers will push me to Gar and then. Naruto stopped talking as sparks started to fly off him rapidly. Hiruzen placed his hand onto Naruto's shoulder to calm him. After several seconds, Naruto calmed down. Naruto-kun, I will personally deal with your new teacher. I guarantee you that you will no longer get treated like that in the academy again. Hiruzen said. Naruto looked up at Hiruzen's eyes. He saw the honesty and truth in his eyes. Naruto nodded. When Hiruzen saw that Naruto was now okay, he smiled. Good, now go asleep. Imagine that tomorrow is your first day at the academy. Hiruzen said. Naruto jumped back into his bed and quickly fell asleep. Hopefully tomorrow was better for him. Hiruzen left the room and went to his at-home office. He threw his hand up and two Anbu appeared in front of him. I want you to bring me Iruka Yumino immediately. I don't care if he is asleep or having. I want him here now. Hiruzen said, yelled with barely contained anger. The two Anbu disappeared in a shunshin. After 5 minutes the two Anbu reappeared with Iruka in their grasp. He looked tired, confused and angry. Hokage-sama, why did you summon me this late at night? Can't this wait until the morning? Iruka asked groggily. Hiruzen slowly stood up and seemed to glide towards Iruka. He looked at him for several seconds before suddenly thrusted his hand out and wrapped it around Iruka's neck. He then lifted Iruka by his neck. I warned you, Yumino. I fucking warned you. Yet you didn't believe me. I said you were to treat him regularly like the other children, yet you didn't do it. I should kill you for your ignorance. Hiruzen said angrily. Iruka's hands were flying up to Hiruzen's. He was trying to peel Hiruzen's hands off his neck. Unfortunately, it was a desperate and worthless attempt. Hiruzen was just too strong and too angry to let go right now. Unfortunately, you are the only teacher that can change their ways. So for now I will allow you to live. But if you dare go against my orders again and do something to hurt Naruto, I will wipe your existence from this planet. Hiruzen said. Hiruzen loosened his grip and Iruka fell to the floor in a coughing and shivering pile of flesh. Hiruzen looked down onto with disgust. Get him out my office and return him to his house. Make sure to remind him that he still has to teach tomorrow. Hiruzen said. The Anbu nodded and then grabbed Iruka. They then disappeared in a shunshin. Hiruzen sighed and then returned to bed. Sometimes being the Hokage required a little tough love. Next day, Naruto awoke the next morning feeling refreshed and excited for his first day at the academy. He was hoping that his teacher wouldn't be such an asshole this time. After having a hearty breakfast and saying goodbye to Asuma and Hiruzen, Naruto took off to the academy. As usual, he had to deal with the constant glares and harsh whispers from the villagers. But Naruto paid no attention to the villagers and continued his journey to the academy. After several minutes, he arrived at the academy. Naruto walked into the classroom and took his seat in the corner of the room. He was the first to arrive, so he decided to lay his head down. After about 10 minutes, the first of the students started to trickle into the room. By now Naruto had fallen asleep, so he paid no attention to his fellow students. If he had been awake, he would have noticed that the arriving students seemed to be trying to avoid sitting next to him. It seemed that their parents heard that Naruto was in their class and told them to avoid him. After 10 more minutes, the remaining students filed into the room. Naruto woke up from his little nap to see Iruka walking into the room. As soon as Iruka saw Naruto, his face tightened. His smile became forced and his stance became defensive. Luckily for him, he was able to play it off, because if he didn't, the Anbu outside of the academy would have captured him and kill him. Iruka took a seat at the desk and started to take roll. When he got to Naruto's name, he gave a small pause before forcing out the name. Naruto gave a weak here. After that, Iruka continued to roll with no problems. After taking roll, Iruka started the class. Okay class, the first thing we will start going over is the history of Konoha. If you would please turn to page 5 in your history book. Iruka said. All of the class let out a groan but still took out their textbooks. As soon as Naruto saw the page of the textbook, he knew today was going to be very boring. Kami, kill me now. Naruto thought to himself. I'll gladly do it for her. Kyuubi said. Midday lunch break. Students filed out the academy, excited to be able to take a break and meet up with their new friends. Naruto was also excited to have the opportunity to meet some new friends. Naruto saw 2 girls playing alone and decided to try and talk to them. Sakura Haruno had never been a very popular girl. She would usually stay in the house to try to avoid talking to other children. But today she met her new friend Ino, and that all changed. Ino had made Sakura more talkative and open to new people. But now they were both playing in the field during their recess. Naruto slowly walked up to the 2 girls. He lightly tapped Sakura on her shoulder. She turned around in surprise to see a blonde